This is Ron Jeffries. You're listening to the Agile Uprising podcast.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the Agile Uprising podcast. I am tonight's Master of Ceremonies, Jay Hrcsko. Tonight's topic is Help, We're Going Agile. With me are fellow board members James Gifford, Jason Cusack, and Ryan Lockard. Before we get started, a little bit of housekeeping. Did you know that you can actually post questions to us on the podcast listener questions thread at coalition.agileuprising.com that we can answer in a future episode. So if you have a topic or a question that's been bothering you and you would like us to address it, please feel free to post away and we will get to it as soon as we can. But now back to the show. So again, tonight's topic is going to be Help, We're Going Agile. So the four of us are going to share stories and observations about what we've been involved in as part of Agile adoptions and transformations, and hopefully be able to shed some light on what actually happens when a company decides to go Agile, what are some of the downstream impacts, and the capper will be if you could go back in time and tell yourself something about your journey, what advice would you give yourself? So that being said, I'm going to start off with you, Mr. Gifford. Why do companies, in your opinion, want to go Agile? What's the motivator there?
Well, as one of the coaches that I'm working with now would say, their executive buddy told them that while they were out playing a round of golf. Is one of the reasons why companies go Agile. I did a couple interviews over the summer looking for some new clients, and they were mandated by the CEO. And they basically said, the CEO said, we're going to be Agile in 18 months, come hell or high water. A lot of it, and if you're coming from the consulting brand, a lot of consulting companies are selling better, faster, cheaper. And that's why you want to do Agile. And they're losing out on actually why companies are doing Agile. One of the last companies I was doing it at, when they went to do their Agile implementation, they were doing it because they wanted to improve the life of their software developers. And they wanted to get quality products into the market faster. So that was their reason for doing Agile. So it's a crazy mix.
Ryan, what's your experience been along the same lines?
So I think it's somewhat similar. My experience has been more with leaders that have actually been successful in Agile before. So my personal experience has rarely been in one where it's a net new 1-0 type exposure. But I do believe, James kind of hit on something there, the faster, better, cheaper. There's a notion out there that, waterfall's passe, Agile is the new rave. As soon as you go Agile, you're going to start being able to release products faster to the market for cheaper because you're not going to be burdened with a heavyweight process and you no longer have to document things. And if you tell any executive that they're going to be able to crank out 2 to 3 times as much product, they just see their revenues growing to the 2 and 3 power. Now, the validity of those statements is regularly called into question, but I think it's an opportunity for them and for their leaders in their mind to leverage economies of scale and try to get more value quicker. Which genuinely, I think there is some credence there, but it's all devil's in the details in the implementation.
Jason, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think both those observations are really good. I think from my perspective, it was really more around alignment. It was really more about playing the blame game on a daily basis in waterfall land, where QA would blame the developers for introducing defects. Developers would then blame the business analysts for having shitty requirements. The business would then blame IT for not delivering. IT would then blame the business for not being clear with the request and not really understanding their business model. In my mind, I think some of the sell of Agile was, we're going to be kind of in the same ship together. And there's really no reason to play this blame game, because at the end of the day, if we don't deliver value for our constituency, we've all lost, right? And it doesn't matter whose fault it is. I know that hasn't been an experience that maybe a lot of people have had, because I think that what Ryan and James described is probably more commonplace. And I think I was just fortunate to be in a position where those things weren't really the crux of why we were trying to go agile. It was really more around alignment. And in my mind, I think that is, as coaches going forward, that's probably a good way to sell things beyond the faster, stronger, cheaper model. Because I don't know that agile is cheaper initially. Is it faster? Maybe. But at some level, if you do have your business and technology folks kind of collaborating together and figuring out, a common game plan, I think that's really the true benefit.
Now, my experience at my current engagement is a little bit different. In ours, it actually our CEO, the head of the company's come out and said that by X year we want to double. We want to double in size. We want to double in profitability. We want to triple in market penetration. And the thought was, when a bunch of these C-level executives got together and tried to bandy ideas around how do we grow the company to that size at that rapidity, one of the guys, I don't know if it was our COO or whomever, somebody came out with the idea, well, we should really look at doing an iterative development model. And the answer posed to the question was, we do a lot of good work, but we spend a lot of money and it seems to take a lot of time. So what if we deliver a better product quicker? Can't we then spend the same amount of money to hire even more people and deliver more? And that dovetailed into a larger, longer conversation where it eventually came out that the CEO said, this is something that we really want to do because it helps me meet my goal of us increasing market penetration in size. So it is sort of that quicker, better, faster, cheaper. But at the same time, it's also there's an end state of the business that they have in mind, and our current, for what amounts to a legacy delivery model, was not accommodating that. So it's sort of the same as you guys, but a little bit different. There was really more of a look of a process improvement or operational streamlining. That was the lens that they used, which I thought was interesting. I never heard that approach before. So when you guys are somewhere, and I'll start with you, Ryan. But when you have a leader come up to you, so you just said that your experience has been primarily people who've had a positive success with Agile in the past. When a leader comes to you and says, quote unquote, we're going Agile, what does that mean? And does that change depending upon the person it's coming from? Does it change upon the company? What ties into that statement when some C blank executive comes out and says, hey, we're going Agile?
I think it depends on the day and the problem that they want to push forward, the agenda item that they have. No, but to be honest, and just to set some context, I'm a little bit different from all three of you, actually, in that most of the Agile transformations or Agile programs I've been working in are on the smaller end of scale. So I'm not talking about the dozen or multiple dozens of teams. I'm usually talking about under 10 teams. So transformations are not generally huge. I can speak... I think as humans, we generally speak to the most recent experiences when we talk about our history. But most recently, I had the benefit of both the leader of the technology division and the leader of the business or the product division, both fully buying into the idea of going Agile. And what they meant was shifting the business and the technology model into one that delivers incremental value at a sustainable rate. Using best practices, talking about a 15-year-old legacy product with millions of lines of legacy code, just laden with technical debt, horrible delivery process, and features built on top of features by way of company and product acquisition. So if there's ever been an opportunity for us to find some meaningful ways to employ best practices into a software product, that was going to be one. So when I was approached, it was generally to help harden a process that actually employed best practices, something that allowed us to deliver meaningful value, identify what values means, and then deliver it, as well as to, I think, Jason and Jay, you both talked about creating alignment. I know exactly two things were said regularly when we first started the last transformation. We want more transparency and we want more alignment. So those were the main reasons that I think my leaders were approaching me at that time.
What about for you, Gifford?
It depends on really the client and where they're at. Ultimately, the first first Agile transformation I ever did, the leaders were basically saying, you're doing Scrum. We're bringing you Scrum because they were looking to replace the project management philosophy from Waterfall. And they said, hey, Scrum is real easy to do, so we're going to implement that. And they brought on all of the project management aspects of it and didn't fix the portfolio. They didn't fix how work got in. They didn't fix the business buy-in. And so it was Agile by name. Current engagement I'm on, it's their third round of Agile transformation. And while there are still pockets of small holdout bad Agile, they spent a lot of time with the Learning Consortium, and they're trying to take a 325-year-old company to a value-based organization where they're bringing in holistic agility. So I've been on both ends of the spectrum where you're going with this scaling framework or you're going with this methodology because that's Agile, to, hey, we're actually trying to embody the Agile mindset and live the Agile Manifesto and its principles in our company. And here's how we're going to do that. So it's ultimately being on two ends of the spectrum, and the areas where they're willing to experiment and have cross-functional teams, and they're really drinking the Kool-Aid and willing to try something, and if the process doesn't work, move on, or allow the business, or even starting to pivot their portfolio from projects to actual product-based, value-driven practices. It's night and day. And so I'm thankful to be in an organization right now that is actually embodying the mindset and not trailing down what most companies are doing today, which is Agile by name and just glomming on and installing SAFe or DAD or less or whatever the hot new framework is that some consulting companies sold them.
Right. There's the whole adoption versus transformation conversation. And if you're just going to do what Mike McCalla calls Agile theater and then bolt a framework on top of that, it really doesn't get you anywhere. Jason Cusack, what's been your experience when the highest paid person in the room walks in and says we're going Agile? What do they really mean?
Well, when I hear that, Jay Hrcsko, I think what they're really saying is we're stopping doing waterfall. I don't necessarily think they understand what it means to go Agile, and I actually hate that term, to be honest. I think in my mind, nearly every transformation that I have been a part of, and I'll even go back to my first one, it was almost not about at all the values and principles, and more about how. Right. So if you look at the manifesto and you say it's about individuals and interactions over processes and tools, a lot of these organizations start with processes and tools. Right. And the first thing that they usually come up with is we need a RACI. We need a RACI to make sure that everyone understands what their new role is going to be so that we can create some boundaries that people can play with it. And that just drives me crazy. It makes me cringe because we haven't talked about why are we going Agile or what is the benefit of Agile. It's more about how are we going to go do this and what is the process behind it and what does it mean to do Scrum and what's the story behind all these different ceremonies and how do we have effective stand-ups. I mean, they go right into the weeds and very rarely really talk at a vision level and say, what is it that we're trying to gain out of this? Is there a cultural aspect that we're looking to promote? Is there an investment in people that's important to us? So, I think it's, and I think James hit on this a little bit too, with sharing his experience, that when you look at some of these things, yes, there are companies that certainly do it the right way, but there's a lot of other companies that are really just looking for a better way than yesterday. And sometimes bad Scrum is even better than good waterfall, right? So right. We set up these engagements and we go and try to help. And because it's better than waterfall, people think that that's the end state, that all they need to do is have an effective stand-up. I'm even curious. Go ahead.
So, Jay, you said bad Scrum is better than good waterfall. I mean, have you seen bad Scrum worse than waterfall. I mean, one where we're using the term Agile, we're using the term Scrum to really just create a new set of rules by which we beat teams.
Yeah, I have. I mean, usually that's like incremental Scrum, if you will. Where you have your development stories, your QA stories, your UAT stories, your analysis stories, right? You kind of overcomplicate that solution space. But to be honest, because there is that feedback loop and because you have some form of engagement, it still seems, even though as a coach, it seems like it might be worse than what they were doing efficiently at Waterfall. To them, it's still better because they're able to get that feedback sooner than 6 or 7 months or a year or 18 months or whatever the project timeline is. I mean, it's a really good question. And maybe, you know, if I could go back and ask myself that question from, 10 years ago, I'm not sure how I would answer that.
I mean, I'm just going to chime in with one scenario here that, I witnessed firsthand is ultimately they took a company that was doing successful project-based feature-driven development. So they would assemble pretty much cross-functional team. They still got to live in their silos. They all got together, they delivered a feature, and they decided to go to Agile, and they picked up Scrum and XP. They left the component teams in place, and instead of trying to build teams, they left them all as components. And so literally the dependency tree, if you were to go map this out, was 6 to 8 different teams trying to deliver iteratively a piece of functionality across 7 different backlogs, and none of the product owners would talk to each other on what was getting prioritized. So literally you would have serial development so every 2 weeks you have an Agile delivery, but it wasn't working software. It would be delivered, and then the next team would have their 2 weeks, and the next team would have their 2 weeks. The average lifespan on the epics the cycle time on an epic was 181 days to get one single solitary epic completed. So a group of features that were supposed to deliver value, the fastest they could deliver it's 181 days. So that was a scenario where it was Agile by name. They were going through the motions of Scrum, but it made the process that they were doing before was better, and the business was freaking out about the cost overruns. And Agile is not better. We should be going back to what we were doing.
180 days sounds like a long time, but it's better than the 568 I'm working on. So at this point, I would take it. I'm going to skip it around here. So we talked about companies going Agile, doing Agile, being Agile, right? What do companies, and I know, Gifford, before we got started, you were going on this tirade. What do companies not think of when they say we're going to quote unquote go Agile? What are the things that you've seen they just totally whiffed on, and it becomes a problem either quickly or later as things mature?
I mean, a lot of times they spend installing Scrum and they don't look at the technical practices or even the mechanisms to get code into an environment. We do continuous builds on every night before somebody goes home. No, you need to fix that build pipeline. You need to be able to have a pipeline that people can check code in, and it goes to the environment so people can start testing it. Like, they don't invest in making the mechanics of the system of getting code anywhere it all relatively streamlined with good hygiene. They don't focus on the environments. And you can't test some of your test scenarios in your environment because it's not prod-like. If you can't run an ETL job that moves data from a vendor file into your ETL warehouse to be consumed by downstream systems, because the environments just don't support it, and your actual testing is production, that's the problem. They don't, watching these guys not do test-driven development or have unit test coverage. Literally, we watched a implementation go live, and it blew up completely in production because every bit of the code showed that they had 95% unit test coverage, and the builds never failed. And what was happening was every time that they would do a build, there was a QA person running a set of 4 scripts manually that weren't in the automated test suite. And it was what was preventing the entire customer servicing platform from blowing up. Yes, we had unit test coverage, but they had a poor definition of it and what it meant and the implementation of those technical practices. And they literally put it into production and took production down for 3 days because of that person wasn't there handling the fringe case because they were on vacation. So just good hygiene with development practices, using getting to a simple set of version control systems. When your company thinks that 3 different version control systems, you're split between Git, SVN, and I can't remember the name of the other product, but literally all of those 3 different version control systems, letting them choose whatever version control system they want, stop them from being able to pull the quality reports or code coverage reports. These are simple, basic hygiene things that you should be doing from a development shop so that Agile can even really be as effective as it can be. And they just leave this totally laying on the table because they're usually focused on what the project managers are doing.
I think James is really onto something there, but what's interesting to me is I've seen quite often where Agile transformations and leaders focus super hard on those technical best practices and work with the technical teams to make sure that they're quote unquote doing Agile. When reality is a lot of the times we overlook the other aspects of the value delivery. If we are doing everything that James just said, if we're building products with quality shifting left with TDD, if we're building in unit test left, right, and center, we have the world's most robust continuous build, continuous deploy chain in the world. But our product folks are still giving us bad requirements, or our sales team doesn't understand how to communicate with customers that we're going to start seeing changes more rapidly. Or if our product roadmaps are still these crystal ball pie in the sky 3-year runways of things where we think we know what people are going to be doing in 24 months, let alone next week. I think we're basically, I'm not a big fan of oh, good brain, fuck you. Theory of constraints. But I think, what we do is we look at the technical practice as the constraint, when in reality, it's usually not going to be that, is my experience. You see things in other areas of the business that need optimization as well.
Jason. Yeah, Ryan, that's a great point, man. I mean, I think one of the things that I was thinking through when James was talking was, there's 2 aspects. There's building the thing right, which is what we're talking about from a technical practices perspective, but then there's also building the right thing. And I think that one of the things that I've seen is that, you have these product managers that hide behind the term MVP, and you ask them, what is your MVP? What is your minimum viable product? What is the bare minimum you need to learn more about your customer base? And what they'll say is, it's the backlog. I need everything in the backlog delivered, right? They're being lazy about it. So they're kind of taking that old school scoping conversation that we all used to have, and they're perpetuating that, but they're calling it something different. That's an Agile term, so that they feel like they're, quote, doing Agile, right? But they're not really being Agile. They're not really thinking through, what are the experiments we have to conduct? How are we going to learn more about the problem space? Is it okay not to have a fully functioning product in order for us to learn more about what we should build? So I think that what you're talking about, Ryan, really resonates with where my head was at.
And, far be it for me to not jump on every opportunity to call people lazy, but I think a lot of it, too, is just the organizational behavior patterns for years and years and years have been that we just throw requirements at technical teams, and then when our product doesn't sell, it's because either A, the technical teams didn't do what we told them to, or they didn't do it fast enough, right? I think we spend all this time, money, and effort sending the technical teams to training, and we sending the technical teams to certifications and things of that nature, which are valuable. I'm not undermining that, but we ignore the elephant in the room that if we build the most optimized delivery team in the world, yet we're still building the wrong thing, we're better off going to the bar or playing golf because we're just wasting our time.
So you guys talked a lot about technical teams and the technical aspects that people forget. Jason touched on, the hiding, the rebadging of the old way of doing things, hiding behind the term product owner and MVP. My experience is one of the things that always gets forgotten is, Eminem forgot about Dre. We always forget about the business. And one of the things that I heard in my current engagement, which really made me think, is we were talking about, I was in a mixed group of people talking about the agile transformation that my engagement's going through with a fairly rigid deadline. And the remark made from someone on the business side was, we really don't have to worry about that. That's an IT thing. Agile is an IT thing. Which it didn't blow my mind, but it really made me think, Jason, you alluded to before, you made the great point of, I hate that word. I hate the idea we're going agile, because that just comes with a laundry list. It's front loaded with preconceived notions and opinions. And my experience is, if you have the business guys thinking that it's just going to be the technology guys, well, then you end up with cargo code agile, right? You're doing all the motions, but you're not actively encountering that positive change or whatever, because they're not even cognizant of it. James, you and I and Jason Cusack were all in the same boat at one point, where all of technology was dug in and the business was basically on the outside looking in. And then when we tried to engage them, it was a little haphazard, because they didn't even know that they were supposed to be at the table, let alone that they're carving the turkey.
Yeah, that's a true statement.
So we talked a little bit about what it means when they say we're going agile. What do companies not think of? We sort of touched on this, but what have you guys seen that went wrong? That you could see it. It was like a slow motion car wreck where you could see it happening. You could see this is going wrong, and then it didn't go well, and you basically saw it coming, and for whatever reason you were powerless to stop it. I'm going to start with Cusack. What have you seen that went wrong that honestly you really think could have been preventative with just a little bit of more forethought?
Yeah, I think you touched on it a little bit, Jay. One of the things that I saw was not engaging the business at the same time, right? And I think it was really more of coming into the transformation. And again, I hate that word too, because it portends that there's an end state at some point. But beyond that, coming into the middle of that, it was really focused on the practices. It was really focused on how do we optimize technology. And all you guys basically have brought that up in one conversation or another, and even on this podcast. So, to me, it was really, once we do engage the business, I think one of the issues was that the business was essentially saying, well, I'm a little bit behind the curve and I'm really busy running the business. So instead of engaging, I'm going to send you one of my direct reports who's going to give me the information that I need to make decisions. And then that person delegates to someone else, and that person delegates to someone else, until you're talking to a person who is not empowered, who doesn't have a holistic vision of what's going on. And that person is now your product owner, right? And they're not really a product owner by virtue of what we would define as one, but they're playing that role. And then you have this whisper down the lane set of activities where, that person's communicating with the teams. They're taking it to their manager, their manager's manager. Then that person's taking it to the person who's really the product owner. And there's a lot lost in translation. And that creates this spin cycle of, are we building the right thing? And, again, I think it goes back to that blame game of, if we don't have all those things kind of lined up, then it's always technology's fault. You guys started this. You didn't bring us into the fold soon enough. We're really busy people. And now you're expecting us to spend more time with you to discuss something that we feel like you should know already. And to me, that's the biggest mistake is not involving the business. And it's more that it's not having a business sponsor or a champion on the business side working with their peer group to say why this is important.
Yeah, I think, first of all, I want to second, third, and fourth that. But the other big thing that I think you kind of see that goes wrong, and I'm speaking about my engagement from the past, not my most recent, but it's perpetuated over and over again, is not understanding the problem that you're trying to solve with going agile in the first place and just throwing out solutions. I mean, hey, we're going to go Scrum, or I heard one of you guys say, hey, we're going to be agile by 2018. First of all, that doesn't resonate with me in the slightest, but we're throwing out solutions and never actually saying what outcomes we're actually trying to create. One example I have is, I think it was probably the third or fourth try for this one company to quote unquote go agile. It was under 10. I want to say it was like 5 or 6 teams, and they decided to roll out SAFe for 5 or 6 teams, so the Scaled Agile framework. And I think, Jay, you said a slow car crash. It was the slowest car crash I ever see roll out in front of me. At that point, nobody could say anything because it was coming from on high. This is what we're doing. And just watching somebody take a framework and apply it without understanding the mechanics behind it, the impact of the framework, and how it could be adjusted, or pretty much in that case not used, because you're hitting a screw with a hammer at that point. I think getting an education on what these tools and these practices are that we're looking to employ, and how they would be used to solve the problems in your current domain.
Ryan, you hit on a good point where you talked about they were too worried about the output and not the outcomes, right? When a company puts an arbitrary date out and says, hey, we need to be agile by X date, which is something I sadly have a lot of experience with, at that point you're more concerned with the output, checking that box, as opposed to the outcome of, I know Jason hates the word transformation, but he's right. It really should be, instead of transformation, we should say evolution. But you really should be concerned with the evolution of moving towards the desired state and then moving past it. You're right. You hit the nail on the head, but stop worrying about the checkbox and the metric and worry about what the actual end result outcome is.
I've talked myself out of a job offer with that before. I was told we need, in the interview process, we need to be 80% agile by 2018. I said, what the hell does that even mean? And then I said, all right, well, what are we actually trying to correct? And the answer was that we're not 80% agile in whatever year it was. I'm like, okay, this is a mismatch of skills and resources.
Yeah, if you ask why are we going agile, and whoever you're talking to can't give you a solid reason as to why, that's a bit of a dicey scenario. Then you end up you're the fourth coach in 6 months, and when you ask why you're the fourth coach, they say, well, the last guy couldn't deliver agile. And then, well, what do you mean he couldn't deliver agile? What's agile mean? I don't know. You're the coach. You tell me.
Yeah.
Gifford, thoughts?
One of the slowest car crashes I've seen is an organization chew through 9 coaches in 3 years. They ultimately hired a lot of talented agile coaches with the right set of skills to help them move the needle. Now, granted, it wasn't really enough coaches for the 66 teams that they were ultimately trying to flip and start their agile evolution, as you would like to say it, because they weren't ready. They weren't ready to listen. And as pragmatic as those coaches were, everyone bringing a unique solution to the problem for the area that they were supporting, completely overcapacitized. There was absolutely no listening. No matter what those coaches said, they weren't going to move the needle in the organization, and they ultimately ground they ground those people into a pulp, and they got frustrated and left. And they were probably some of the most talented people I had the opportunity to work with. So, not utilizing your coaches, not utilizing your industry experts to help you move that needle.
I think when it comes to me about what did I see that went wrong, Jason touched on it when he said, the company day one had the tool set in mind, or day 1.5, they already knew that they had a framework in mind. I think that does tie to the thing that we all keep repeating is, what are we looking to solve when we say we're going to utilize Agile, we're going Agile? What is the why statement? If you're going to tell me that I have to use this tool and I have to use this framework and I have to use this scaling methodology, you're really painting me into a corner if you don't even have a big picture of what you really want. Again, why do you want to go Agile? I don't know. Because we want to, faster, quicker, cheaper. I think you constrain people too early, and that's a recipe for success. The slow motion car crash that I saw that always sticks in my mind is the one transformation and evolution I went through, there was just horrible communication. There was ridiculously poor communication. You had the top of the pyramid just yelling the A word at the top of their lungs, and you had the middle managers and some of the team leads trying to figure out how to actually take things to an agile state. And the better managers, the better middle managers, I'll call back to a previous podcast, were good at setting the right expectation and framing the right narrative around why we're doing this and what is involved. But there was little to no communication from the top of the mountain. There was emails that you could tell were written by an admin, and they were very long and wordy. And Ryan, if you put them through that Hemingway app, they probably would have been chewed up and destroyed. And you got those once every quarter and a half. And fear, uncertainty, the flood, fear, uncertainty, doubt, that's fed by lack of communication. And the fact that wasn't communicated well made a lot of people nervous. It spikes attrition. Like you said, Gifford, this company chewed through coaches as well, where I think they really should have kept some of those people around. It was it's a bit of an ugly scenario as you're watching it unfold, because I'm saying to myself, all it takes is one more email or one more guy walking around just shaking hands and saying hi to people, and maybe there'd be a little bit more comfortability with the current state, and people would be more amenable to changes as they're coming along. But enough of the negative, right? So this is all the stuff that we've all seen what went wrong. I'll start with Ryan. What have you seen that went really, really well?
So it's not too far off from what you just said. I mean, I kind of have my 6 steps to train. Again, I'm with Jay here. I'm not a big fan of the word transformation, but what can you do to really create a successful transition state, right? And the first one is creating that vision of why, coming up with a mission statement, something that defines the better outcome. And we did that with the team I'm on now. We about 2 years ago, we started doing the shift from traditional waterfall process to a more agile state. And the first thing we did, and it wasn't me and the leadership team, it was as a collective. We sat down and we actually wrote out a narrative of what better looks like, so we could all visualize it in our head. And it wasn't some pie in the sky thing that we were never going to achieve. It was just, how are we going to work together to create something that we're more proud of than what we have today? We didn't talk about software practices. We didn't talk. We used zero jargon. And what we came up with is something that still sits today on the homepage of my wiki for my program. And what we talk about is actually, so I work in healthcare, software that trains clinicians to administer aid in the hospital, non-hospital setting. And we're talking about things about creating world-class software that prevents avoidable death in the hospital, non-hospital setting. So something meaningful, and how we want to have a positive impact on health outcomes. And I think once you start creating that codified vision of what better looks like and why we're going through these sometimes alien trainings, these alien processes, I think that really helps people to understand, hey, there is an end game here. We're not just doing this because it's a fad. We're actually trying to create something of meaning.
What better looks like is actually a great statement. Kudos to you on that one. I think that if more companies spend some time to think about, visualizing what that end state, to your point, visualizing what that end state looks like, visualizing what the success, what us as a success looks like, I think that would be, a lot of companies would be much better off. Jason Cusack, what are your experiences with what you've seen done and gone very, very well?
Well, I think what Ryan said makes a lot of sense to me, and I think that's a great starting point. And I think that as part of that discussion, one of the things that I like to do when I talk to a leadership team is, after the discussion's over, I say, don't tell me, show me, right? Show me what that means to you. Be a leader. Show your teams that this isn't just something that you're going to, quote, inflict on them, that you're going to live by those same things. And the most successful organizations that I've seen are that the leadership team has an open stand-up, and they certainly don't talk about things that they're not able to talk about in public if it's proprietary or confidential or whatever. But they have their own roadmap. They have their own set of stories or a Kanban board or something that they're working off of, and that the teams are helping to seed what is next. What do the teams need from the executive team in the form of support? And when the teams are able to walk by or see those things in big, invisible kind of charts, it makes them feel connected. It makes them feel like our leadership team has bought into this so much that they're actively doing this as well. And it creates this notion of we're all in this together, right? This isn't just something that the teams are doing. This is something that our organization is doing, and our leaders are leading by example. That, to me, is really where some of these things need to start. And when I say leaders, I mean business and technology leaders together. Mm-hmm. And when that happens, to me, that is what helps drive the success of an evolution.
Gifford, what are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, I'm going to have to resonate on a lot of, what, Jason and Ryan had to say. It would just be a big repeat. But I mean, ultimately, I'm at a company that is, going on their third try. They're on their third attempt at the evolution. And they're going, we finally have gotten, to the point where we have, upped the transparency in the organization by like 10 times. It's like literally watching the Grinch's heart grow at the end of how the Grinch stole Christmas. With the amount I just went there. With the amount of transparency in the organization. So literally pretty much every document that we're working on, and as we're evolving, getting the business bought in, getting the business engaged, it's all out there for people to see. Org designs. The only thing that's ever hidden right now is stuff that we're not at a point where we can publicly share, that is ready for prime time. But any document, anything that we have, it's out there, available. People can stop by. We have public stand-ups. We've started putting together, I hate to use religious terms, but trinities or even triads focused on, our delivery. So we have every single product area, and in this particular instance, they're focusing on customers. So we're centralizing value streams around customer journeys. There is a triad that lives within that journey that is a business representative. It is a technical. So we're representing its business excellence, technical excellence, and delivery excellence. Form a triad. So it's pulling in elements of what you see from the Scrum Guide, but it's focused on product. It's focused on technology or the development team. And it's focused on delivery, which is your Scrum teams. And we found a place for the project managers in the programs. So we're taking away that traditional project manager and turning them into program managers, where they're responsible for things like costs, governance, kind of controls, and the product owners have been able to take some of that burden away that the project management team has had in the past. And so there has been a quality of life improvement for the program management team now. Mm-hmm. The product owner is now needing to take the responsibility for the business and what they need to deliver from their end. So they've been really being trained on getting what value is and how to build, measure, learn, bringing in concepts of the lean startup as we pivot their portfolio away from projects into product or journey, in this instance, based funding. And then we have delivery. And right now we're going through a process to potentially bring in Agile coaches that also, since coaching isn't necessarily supported in the organization at a level that it needs to be, we've found, if we have Agile coaches that are there in a delivery manager capacity, we can ultimately have coaches there that are providing guidance and direction to a set of Scrum Masters. So, we're finding ways to get coaching into an organization, but also strive for delivery excellence. As we do the scaled retrospectives, we're bringing back in that feedback, and you have a delivery team that's focused on the practices and processes and inspecting and adapting what is coming out of those feedback sessions on the actual process. So now you're having the business owning what they need to deliver, the product. You have people working and owning the process and the evolution of that. and you have people focused on the technology and the excellence that is in there. So, that's
the triple-headed monster, basically split it up and everybody go down their own your avenue.
And it's really interesting to see patterns of, the tech, the lead architecture guy that kind of sees over that journey, really building relationships with somebody in the product team. So when they're able to make suggestions about, hey, this new iOS update is coming, our mobile platform could use X, Y, and Z. You may want to think about that when we start moving into some of these agile business cases that you're putting forth. So that trinity that we've started to create is, it's being successful. And it's because it's not one person responsible. It's 3 people working in conjunction to ensure that a particular value stream is delivering quality products.
Thank you. That's pretty interesting. The whole idea of the Trinity, the 3s resonate a lot in nature. So it's a good tack to take. I think some of the thing that I've seen done well is Jason talked about, leaders doing their own stand up, and Ryan talked about a lot of good communication. I'm a big believer in absolute transparency. Not like our presidential administrations. That's where they're going to be transparent and then prosecute whistleblowers. But the teams that I've seen that have embraced it and done very well are teams where their leadership and their management to their team, to their division, to their silo, their vertical, what have you, overly communicate. Hey, we're working on this. Here's the next step. I don't know when this is coming, but we're also looking at this, and we have A and we have B, and B is first. And I know you have questions about C. If you overly communicate make sure you're communicating pertinent, timely updates. Everybody at the end of the day, it's the WIFM. It's what's in it for me, right? People are worried about where their role fits in an agile adoption. People are worried about how their job changes. People are worried about what am I going to be doing next? Am I suited to this? Am I better or worse off? If you communicate what changes are coming well ahead in advance, my last engagement, I think the teams that took like a fish to water to the transformation evolution were the people who had been overly communicated about what's actually coming. So by the time it actually happened, it was more of a non-issue. It was more of a, hey, we've been hearing about this for 6 months. I'm glad it's finally over. Now can we get back to actually doing work and delivering? So that's the thing that I've seen done well is a rapid communication cadence and almost full transparency that keeps the natives from getting restless and puts everybody's mind at ease. I think that's very powerful, and it doesn't require much more than just honesty, right? Mm-hmm. But that really can work. That's what I think.
Agreed. I think you really hit something there. I mean, I recently got into a pretty healthy debate with somebody that swore up and down that people hate change, humans hate change, and I think what it is just, to your point, there's no transparency. People don't hate change; they hate unguided change. They hate change for what is perceived to be for no reason or for change's sake. It's when you start giving line of sight into the why that you realize, hey, people don't actually hate change. They're okay with it if they understand what's in it for them.
That's absolutely right. If you'll take the fear out of it if they're at least cognizant of what's going on and what's coming. Jason, thoughts on that? The idea of communicating to change ahead, and how that can potentially assuage fears. What's been your experience in that realm?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I mean, I think I'm with you that it's not that people dislike change, it's that they want to be a part of it. And I think it goes back to the whole inflicting agile, right? When you are on a team and you're being told very prescriptively, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to do it, and you're just a cog in a wheel, I think it's very difficult for people to accept that and say, oh yeah, you know what? I'm just going to change my day-to-day from what it was before to what I'm being told to do now. I think that there's some level of resistance there. I don't even know if it's over-communication from my experience that helps to soften that or helps to have people embrace it. But I think it's including them. I think it's, as an executive leadership team, this is what we think. What do you think? Does this resonate with you? Are there things that we're missing? Is there something that you feel like should be on our mission statement or on our vision that is missing? And I think that when you engage those folks, and people feel like this is our transformation and this isn't something that I'm just being told to do, the results are far different.
Good points. We're quickly running out of time, so I want to wrap this one up, but I want to throw one last question out there to everybody. And Mr. Gifford, I'm going to start with you. So if you could jump into the hot tub time machine and go back and tell yourself something about your journey, a piece of warning, a piece of advice, a bon mot to take forward, what would it be?
I would have told myself to stop, not spend those 2 years being a dogmatic Scrum guy. And I would have, told myself to start looking at Jason Little's lean change management a lot sooner. Unfortunately, it wouldn't have been written yet. But I would have told myself to study change management more, and to, tell myself that there are a plethora of practices. Even when I started doing Agile, there were a plethora of practices. And if I could have instilled in myself back then that it was the Agile buffet, that would have been a 10 times more beneficial to my journey. So nosing around in the dark with just a purview of Scrum being Agile for, the first 2 years of my Agile career kind of definitely was a setback in my mind. And I wish I had known when I was working more with the teams as a Scrum Master, I wish I had known about a lot of these other Agile practices. I could have solved a lot of different problems back then that, I just had the blinders on.
Cool. Thanks for being honest. Ryan, same question.
Yeah, I think I would probably say something similar to what James just said, but I feel like I have to be intelligent and not say ditto. One thing I think I would say is I kind of weaned myself into more of an Agile practice, and kind of did the I hate saying Scrum butt, but basically Scrum butt. I kind of wish I would have just jumped ship sooner and gone full bore into working directly with Agile teams rather than trying to gradually slide my practices in. But at the end of the day, I feel like I've had a pretty good run, so I don't know that I would actually change that. As much as I want to say I wish I did, I wish I started with something other than Scrum. I think there is something to that whole Shuha stuff. So starting with Scrum probably helped be the forebearer of some of the learning, the early learning that I had that crafted where I'm at today. But the one thing, and it's not even something I need to go back that far to remind myself, is to just breathe and remain patient. Not everybody is going to have the same experiences or even the same mindset as myself, and to have a little more empathy and take time to do the deep inhale. The exhale will take care of itself, if I'm channeling Andy Clef here. But be a little bit more, even when I think I'm being more empathetic and a little bit more patient, take it a step further every single day.
Interesting. Jason, in the hot tub time machine, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I would go back and tell myself to surround myself by like-minded people. And when I say that, like at the organizations that I've been a part of, you kind of get confined with what your flavor, what your version of Agile looks like. And one of the things that I use as an excuse for a while is, I said, look, my company's not going to send me to conferences, and if they're not going to pay for it, then I'm just not going to go. And that was probably the biggest mistake I made, because I think I could have really developed a much deeper skill set just by listening to the experiences of others and really engaging in community events, like whether that was going to conferences or looking for meetups to attend on a monthly basis, whatever it happened to be. I think that taking yourself out of your comfort zone of where you are right now and try to learn how someone else is doing it or hear from someone else, their experience in a completely different domain. I wish I had done more of that. And that's something that I've tried to continually look for, new conferences that I can go to that I know nothing about. So like if I'll give you an example. If DevOps is something I'm struggling in, I don't need to be a developer to go learn about that, right? And sometimes reading a book isn't the greatest thing either, because there's not that collaboration with someone else to ask that back and forth questions to kind of set at least some muscle memory about what are the important aspects that you gained across your journey, and trying to pick up at least a little bit further down that path than where I would have started. I think that there's a huge benefit, and right now there's so many things that are going on. Really isn't that hard to engage, and I wish I had done more of that. And I'm hoping that someone is listening to this and they're going, you know what, I'm heading to that next conference because I heard that advice.
That is a great answer, and I would endorse that. Anybody that's listening to this should definitely take Jason's advice there. That's solid.
Yeah, that resonates for me. I mean, that's quite honestly, that's what kick-started my whole journey in doing what I'm trying to do now. It's attending a conference and meeting up with people such as yourself, be like-minded individuals, to realize that there's some learnings to be got here. And like Jason said, my company doesn't pay for it. Well, forget them. I'll do it myself because it's personal development. It's like that whole argument that John Kay makes in Obliquity about if there's a company, if your whole goal is to maximize shareholder value, your company will go out of business within 48 months. Because you're going to make wrong decisions based upon short-term things set in front of you if you're just trying to drive shareholder value. But if your goal is to make your customers happy, then your longevity is all but assured. Looking at your career, right? If your goal is just to have your company pay for shit and to make money, well, you're always going to be chasing the check. But if you're looking to grow as an individual, the money and the cachet, the professional acumen and respect, that dovetails right behind that. I think that's a really, really, Jason, so I don't know if I can top that one. If I had to go back and give myself a piece of advice, it would probably be, don't worry about what you don't know. Worry about how to improve what you do know. Because I have a little bit of ADHD, when I was told, for example, in a previous gig that we were going agile, right? I wanted to solve for everything right there. I wanted to solve every single possible fringe case. Where does everybody's job sit? What does every permutation look like? Who's doing what, doing when, doing where? And when I finally let that go, and it took a bit, and a bit of confessional here, when I finally let that go and just worried about what I did know and worried about making that the best I could, that's when it seemed like the clouds lightened and the sun came out and, birds were singing and everything was going in the right direction. Because I stopped worrying about known unknowns and unknown unknowns and started worrying about known knowns, to quote Donald Rumsfeld. Can't believe I just did that. And that was my turning point for me. So thanks, guys. Wrapping it up, Gifford, let's go around the horn. Where can people find you? Where can they look for you?
So if you're ultimately trying to find me, you can find me at Scramando on Twitter. That's my handle on the Coalition site. And you can find me at my blog, scramando.com. I infrequently blog there, but it's still there.
Ryan, how about you?
Twitter at Agile PHL. So you can find me at ryanlockard.com. And I think my coalition handle is just Ryan. So first one in.
Jason.
On Twitter, I'm at Scrumjitsu. And I have a pretty healthy presence on LinkedIn from time to time. You can find me there at Jason Cusack. And I think my preferred way to communicate would be through the coalition at agileuprising.com. Come find me there.
Awesome. And lastly, myself, you can find me on Twitter at Backdoor Agile. I do most of my blogging through the coalition. I find that's easiest for me, and I am pretty active posting stuff on LinkedIn, so you can find me there. I'm not going to try and explain how to spell my last name. So I would like to thank Ryan, Jason, and James for all taking time out of their busy evenings to record this. And on behalf of myself and my co-host, I'd like to thank all of our listeners. Thank you very much for listening to our podcast. Reminder, you can find us not only on the Coalition site, but you can also find us in iTunes. And if you're listening and you like what you hear, please leave us some feedback. We like to see that coming across the wire, what people like and what don't like, because it just helps make us better. Thank you very much, and until next time.